I was a child protege in politics.
I understand you've been in this industry for 50 years
Yeah,
in the political arena.
More than 50 years, but don't tell my wife, she thinks I'm 45. I was the chairman of the whole Labour Party in Scotland. I will, until my last breath, be involved in politics.
I understand you're on Big Brother. I heard you were a pussy on there. Sorry, pussycat.
I was on, not just on Celebrity Big Brother, but on the greatest Celebrity Big Brother. Most people would agree with that. I had to pretend to be a cat. I had no idea people were watching, that it would be a big thing.
Welcome to Bricks to Riches. Today I have a very special guest, a very famous politician, Mr. George Galloway. George, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
George, can you please provide a brief overview and a background of your political career for the last 50 years? I understand you've been in this industry for 50 years in the political arena.
More than 50 years, but don't tell my wife, she thinks I'm 45. I was a child protege in politics. I was the chairman of the whole Labour Party in Scotland at the age of 26, the youngest ever, and that will never be beaten. So I spent my life in socialist politics. I was expelled from the Labour Party by Tony Blair over the Iraq War more than 20 years ago now. And I will, until my last breath, be involved in politics. And I've been lucky to have been in full-time politics ever since 1973. So that is 51 years. I was a member of Parliament for almost 30 years in three different cities, in Glasgow, in London and in Bradford. And inshallah, fourth city and 200 more days as a member of Parliament in Rochdale, but maybe we'll come on to that. I was born of working class stock, grew up in a council house. My father was a factory worker, my mother a school cleaner. I have done quite well by the grace of God. I'm not poor, but I haven't lost my roots, and I've never forgotten where I came from, and that informs my political beliefs.
Wow, you have vast experience in politics, and also it's lovely to see that you're very humble. One question I'll ask you, because you're fighting for the Rochdale by-election, you want to be a member of Parliament in Rochdale. Why did you choose Rochdale? This podcast is getting, at the moment we're shooting this podcast in Rochdale. Why Rochdale? What do you like about Rochdale?
Well, I like a lot, and in particular the people, but that's not the reason why I'm here. I'm here because there's an election. It's my job to put my point of view across at elections. For my sins, I'm endlessly suffering at the moment. A supporter of Manchester United, so it's been a tough few years since another Scotsman, Alex Ferguson, retired way too soon. Two of my children live in Manchester. Two of my sons, both of them football proteges. And so I'm in Greater Manchester all the time for them, for the matches. And I know Rochdale very well. I first spoke here 25 years ago. And I've got to tell you, Rochdale was a much better place then than it is now. It's been allowed to slide. Its town hall clock has become dirtied. The local politicians have let it down, and I'm here in part to restore civic pride in Rochdale. I may only be here 200 days. I may be elected on the 29th of February, and then at the general election I'm defeated or I don't stand. But in that time, I promise you I'll put Rochdale on the map, and not just the Northwest map, not just the British map. People will be talking about Rochdale all over the world if I'm successful in this by-election. Of course, my main campaigning cause is Gaza, where there are 29,000 Muslims in Rochdale care deeply about Gaza, but there are thousands of others, non-Muslims, who've been on the marches in Manchester and here in Rochdale are flying the flag, are boycotting the Israeli goods, and so on. There's a huge proportion of the population of Rochdale deeply care about the slaughter in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza, the massacres, the children being pulled out of the rubble, murdered and maimed. And as I, for decades, have been the number one voice, the most prominent voice for the Palestinian people, and a by-election comes up here, it's kind of obvious. It's not rocket science.
So, George, talking about Gaza, obviously, talking to you earlier, you said that you're not in for a ceasefire. You want a two-state solution for Gaza. What would you propose if you get the seat
I
for
think
Rochdale?
This is a key point. For 100 days, none of the people in power were asking for a ceasefire. In fact, they were all saying that Israel must be allowed to crush the Palestinian people in Gaza. Now that the public revulsion at the seams has grown to such enormous swell, they are talking about a ceasefire. But I'm not in. Of course, I want a ceasefire, but a ceasefire that sees a resumption of fire next week or next month is no good to anyone. What, are you going to fatten them up before you starve them again? You're going to let their wounds be bound before you kill them again? What we need is a Palestinian state, which they were promised on the White House lawn in the Oslo Agreement, which I supported, by the way, because I was very close to the late President Arafat for many decades. And he persuaded me, look, the Oslo Agreement's the best we're going to get. So reluctantly I said, okay. And we've been made a fool of. It's more than 30 years since the Oslo Agreement. And not 1 inch of Palestine is free. So I stand for Palestinian freedom and the rights of the Palestinian people. And that's what we must now demand. Now, I'll be candid with you. It's not as far off as people think, because Israel has committed such crimes in the last 115 days or so that a mass movement across the world has arisen in revulsion, yes, but in support of the Palestinian cause, which will make politicians have to move. And it's already happening. David Cameron is now talking about recognition of a Palestinian state. 115 days ago, he would never have said that. So this has been a huge boomerang for Israel. There's a Chinese saying, sometimes the enemy struggles mightily to lift a huge stone, only to drop it on its own feet. And that is exactly what Israel has done. It's dropped a huge stone on its own feet.
And I think social media before 30 years ago, people couldn't see what was going on in Palestine. Social media's exposed Israel, what's happening right now.
Nabeel, I was in Beirut in 1982 when Israel invaded and committed the massacres of Sabra and Shatila. Nobody now knows about the massacres of Sabra and Shatila because there were no smartphones.
Yes.
There was no video footage of it. If you're lucky, you'll find a grainy black and white picture of 3,200 massacred Palestinians. But now even our children are watching on their own telephones in real time the massacre of 30,000 dead, 65,000 wounded with no hospitals to treat them, and thousands under the rubble. We've no idea how many thousands are under the rubble. And our children have seen it. And our children are asking us, what are you doing about this? You're supposed to be a politician. You're supposed to be a leader. What are you doing about this? So social media changed the world.
Yes.
In some bad ways,
yes,
but also in some good ways.
But loss of innocent life, men, women in Gaza is very, very sad. If you were in power, would you have called for ceasefire straight away? It took The Western powers 115 days to call ceasefire. What would you have done, George, if you were in power?
Well, it's even worse, Nabeel, than not calling for a ceasefire. They gave Israel the weapons and the money and the diplomatic and political cover to commit these massacres. So they are culpable. They didn't just not call for a ceasefire, they gave Israel the weapons to fire in the first place. So we need, in Britain, if I was the Prime Minister, we need immediate recognition of a Palestinian state, the immediate cessation of British support for Israeli crimes. If I was in Eurovision, I'd say, Israel, don't bother coming to Eurovision. If I was the European Football Association, I'd say, don't bother coming to the UEFA. If I was in France, if I was the president of France, I'd say, we've got the Olympics this year. Don't bother showing up. You are now a pariah state, and we don't want to look at your face. We need to change the entire mindset that is prevalent in the West, where Israel can commit crimes with impunity. It's able to do things no other country would be allowed to do. And if they did do them, they would be immediately sanctioned, banned. Russia is completely wiped out the international sporting and cultural scene. They won't be at the Olympics. They're no longer in the World Cup or the UEFA.
Russia's boycotted.
Yeah, Russia's completely boycotted, but Israel is welcome. How does that compute? So this exceptionalism that Israel has benefited from, where they are allowed to do things that nobody else will be allowed to do, has to come to an end.
And also, George, in the Western world, they have no respect for a Palestinian life. In the Western world, a cat, an animal, a dog has more value than a Palestinian life. Why is that, George?
And not just Palestinian. Muslim blood is much cheaper than other people's blood.
Well, why? We believe in equality.
Well,
if you hurt an animal in the UK, you'll get arrested.
Yeah.
And people are getting killed in the Middle East.
Well, that proves that we don't believe in equality. We have, like lipstick on a pig, a whole set of responses that we are free, we're democratic, we have freedom of speech, we have democratic rights, we believe in human rights, people have civic rights, civil rights. All that is just lipstick on a pig. It doesn't apply, first of all, to Muslims above all, but people of the global south in general also. You can kill Argentinians, Brazilians, much more cheaply than you could kill a European. But Muslim lives in particular are cheap. And increasingly, even in our own country, we don't have these things. The freedom that we used to have, that our grandfathers and fathers fought for, is disappearing in front of our eyes. We are censored. We are algorithmically suppressed. We are shadow banned. We used to have freedom of speech only if nobody was listening to what we said. Someone like me was free to stand on a soapbox and speak, because only a few hundred people at most were ever going to hear me. Now that millions of people hear me, then that freedom of speech begins to be encroached upon. So I just think that, if somebody shows you what they really are, you should believe them. And Britain, the West, the United States have really shown us what they really are over this last period, but for much longer than that. Roughly speaking, let me give you a tariff. A Palestinian life is worth approximately 500 Israeli lives in terms of value. And Muslims in general are 10 a penny. Kill Afghans, kill Iraqis, kill Palestinians, kill Lebanese. Nobody really much cares. It doesn't even make the news. But if the boot were on the other foot, last week in Jenin, undercover Israeli soldiers dressed as doctors murdered 3 people in a hospital One of them, a quadriplegic in a coma,
Wow.
dressed as doctors. That didn't even make the news.
That's barbaric.
If Palestinians had done it
Yeah.
in an Israeli hospital, it would be a story of enormous magnitude. They'd have
be
made,
viral.
they'd have made movies
Yeah.
about it. Somebody would right now be writing the screenplay. This happened in Jenin, in the West Bank, by the way, where there's no Hamas.
Yeah.
To a quadriplegic guy in a coma was shot dead by Israeli special forces dressed in doctors' white coats with stethoscopes and with their machine guns in medical bags.
Sad. Very sad. Now, what's going on in the world, George? You've got Ukraine, Russia, you've got Palestine, you've got Yemen, you've got China, Taiwan. Do you think there's going to be a World War III?
I think we're already in, not World War III, but war throughout the world. If you count and you've adumbrated ably the conflicts that are currently burning, although more are in the making. So, for example, as we speak, unless we're very lucky, Joe Biden will be bombing Iranian targets, if not Iran itself.
Do you think Iran will fight back? Because it's a nuclear state in Iran.
For sure.
They'll fight back.
I don't know if they have nuclear weapons, but they better get them quick. Because North Korea will never be attacked because it does have nuclear weapons. Iraq was destroyed on the wheel because it didn't have nuclear weapons. So, as we speak, Biden may very well be bombing Iran. Iran will bomb back. The empire strikes back nowadays, you see. So, Afghanistan, they thought we were all goat herders.
Yeah.
We were all tribesmen in Afghanistan. But the Afghans whipped their ass.
Afghans are natural warriors. They're known for being warriors.
Somebody once in Glasgow at a meeting I was at said, we Afghans are very peace-loving people, and everybody laughed. Because the Afghans are the best fighters.
Yeah.
And their second to the Afghans is the Yemenis.
Yes.
We're at war with Afghans, we're at war with Yemenis. The Afghan people kicked the empire out of their country with not a fraction of the firepower that Iran has, that Yemen has, that the Iraqi resistance has, that Hezbollah has. And why has Israel withdrawn its forces from the north of Gaza and now, this minute, from Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza? Because they were defeated there on the ground by the resistance. Because, as the Americans found out in Vietnam, it's not the size of the dog in the fight that counts. It's the size of the fight in the dog.
True.
And if you're fighting to defend your own house, your own family, your own land, you're going to fight much harder than a guy who doesn't want to be there. He's only there either because he's been conscripted to do so or because he's paid to do so. So they've picked a fight with people who can fight back and for whom it's an honor to die fighting back. They are perfectly convinced that they will go straight to heaven if they die fighting the enemy that has put itself right in front of them. So we've made big mistakes in the West. And, I spent 30 years in Parliament telling them this. I used to say to them, make a deal with Arafat. Because after Arafat comes people who will be much harder to make a deal with. But they didn't listen.
But George, you've always been a strong advocate of world peace for 30 years.
Yeah.
You've been pushing world peace.
Yeah.
You don't want wars.
I hate war.
Now, hopefully you'll get the seat in Rochdale.
Sure.
So how will you push it differently so this time people listen to you? For 30 years, your voice wasn't listened to.
No,
so what are you going to do different this time,
that's
George?
a good point. It's a good point. What they have to listen to is not me, but the people that sent me there. So I'll be up on my feet on the first day in Parliament. I'll be asking the Prime Minister, and for that matter, the leader of the so-called opposition, who actually supports everything the Prime Minister supports. I'll be saying, you didn't listen to me, but you're going to have to listen to the people in Rochdale, because they've just sent me here, hopefully with a record majority, because they cannot tolerate any longer what you two are doing. And I think it will work for this reason. You know, Dr. Johnson, the great English man of letters, said the knowledge that one is to be hanged in the morning concentrates the mind wonderfully. Well, politicians are hanged every general election. If they survive it, they get another 5 years. This general election is just round the corner. It could be next month. It could be in the summer, but it cannot be later than in the winter. So all these politicians have to say, what if what happened in Rochdale happens to me? What if it happens in Birmingham, in Manchester, in East London? I'll be out and I won't be able to enjoy the life of a member of parliament any longer. So I think it will concentrate the mind wonderfully of the political class if they get a big, big answer to what they've been doing on the 29th of February here in Rochdale.
Well, I wish you good luck with that, George, and I hope you get the seat in Rochdale. Sure. Now, talking in property terms, because I'm a property expert, I've been doing property for 30 years. You've been in politics for 50. So when I bought so many properties in Rochdale, but I'm not too keen on investing in Rochdale at the moment. How will you regenerate the property industry in Rochdale? How would you bring investors like me and billions of pounds in Rochdale? Because people want to invest money in Rochdale and they want return on their investment. So what would you do as a politician to bring investors?
Well, first of all, I'll be seeking your advice on what I need to do, because I have long believed, I'm an expert on some things, but most things I'm not. And I always listen to the experts. And I have an ability that God gave me that if I hear something sensible in my ear, I can speak it eloquently, immediately. So I'll be asking you what I need to do. But on the face of it, I would say this. There is no reason at all for a town 20 minutes from the great metropolis of Manchester to be poor and run down and badly run. None at all. I mean, I hate Labour, but I like Andy Burnham.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Andy Burnham has transformed the image of Manchester. And I want to do that here in Rochdale. But we need change.
Yeah, the change I'd recommend is to get investment in Rochdale, George, would be, for example, have a window where you don't charge any stamp duty money for the government. So that invests money into Rochdale. So you have certain postcodes where there's no stamp duty.
Yeah.
That'll promote growth.
Yeah.
Number 2, offer grants. So basically the government will help you generate an area if you're creating employment. So if there's industrial lands, industrial space, because you're creating employment. So offer grants to new businesses, whoever's building new offices, new warehouses, offer grants. So we can talk about that later, but there's different opportunities.
But and everything you said there makes common sense, and I'm a believer in common sense socialism. That's my politics. I'm not a leftist. I've never been a communist. I'm not a Marxist or a Leninist or any of these things. I believe in common sense socialism, and that is just common sense. When I spoke here first, 25 years ago in Rochdale, after the speech, I went to the market. It was a terrific open-air market, like the one in Bury.
Yeah.
I asked somebody, can you take me to the market? They said, the market no longer exists. Why doesn't it exist? Why would a town like this no longer have a market? What has the council been doing? They've spent £20 million on the town hall, but they can't afford a bucket of tar to fill in a pothole. 20 million on the town hall. And it's adorned by gargoyles. Sorry to put it that way. They're gargoyles, the people that have been running the council here. And I think the people are fed up of them. They want to change them. Of course, it would be better if they themselves change. But if they won't change, we'll change them. Bear in mind, the elections for the council are only 12 weeks after the election of the Member of Parliament. And the momentum that we're building up, I think we'll make big changes in the council. And we'll bring people like you in to say, what do we need to do here to pick this place up? Look, a place this close to Manchester should be prosperous. The middle class people that can't yet afford a tower in Manchester should be coming here and investing here.
Exactly.
You could be in Manchester in a jiffy.
It's like London. You used to work in London and the House of Parliament. So if you have a place in central London and you can't afford to be there, you go a bit further away, 20 minutes away, like Stratford.
Yeah.
And that's still high value.
Yeah.
So Rochdale could have the same principle.
That's what we should have.
Yeah.
And it's criminal that we don't have it. The deprivation here is palpable. You know you can't any longer be born in Rochdale. There will never be another Rochdalian because there's no maternity facilities. Only if you're caught short in the taxi on the way to Oldham will you have been born in Rochdale. How criminal is that? This was a proud place with a real identity. You know, this is the place of Gracie Fields, of Lisa Stansfield. This is a place that was proud of itself, and it is no longer proud of itself. And we're going to clean that town hall clock.
So are you going to build another maternity hospital? Or
I'll be fighting for it. If you can have a maternity hospital in the countryside in Cuba, why can't you have one in Greater Manchester? It is absurd that the facility, they've brought forward the cuts. We were supposed to suffer severe cuts to the local hospital here, which doesn't have a maternity unit. We were supposed to suffer severe cuts in 2025. They brought them forward to 2024. We're going to face them right away. But it'll be over my dead body. I'll be a loud voice that will be heard on these matters. I promise you, when I leave Rochdale, people will be feeling a whole lot better about themselves than they were before I arrived. I make this point, you might think it facile. A Scotsman called Sir Alex Ferguson arrived in Manchester when Manchester United were in the doldrums, hadn't won a pot for decades. And he stayed for 27 years. I can't stay for 27 years, but I will stay.
You might do with today's modern medicine. You could live until 100.
God willing. But I will stay for long enough to fill the trophy room with pride.
I hope so. You've got a lot of passion for politics and you love Rochdale. I hope you do get the seat at the by-election. Going back to property, I understand you had your own house at £1.5 million for sale. Is that the only investment you've done in property, or have you invested in anything else?
Well, actually, I sold that house in Streatham in order to fund my film, The Killings of Tony Blair, which is still available in all good bookshops and Amazon and so on. I'm very proud of the film, but unfortunately, although I raised a lot of money to make it, I fell short. You know what films are like. So I had to sell that house. I no longer actually own a house here, but in Scotland, my wife has, because I'm too old to get a mortgage, my wife is the owner of our house in the borders of Scotland, to which I invite you. It's a very beautiful 200-year-old house. I love property. I love cars as well. I'm sitting here in a car showroom surrounded by cars. I'm not one of these weird lefties that doesn't like progress, doesn't like cars, doesn't like nice clothes. I'm admiring your suit right now.
Thank you, George.
By the way, I want good things, and I want them for my own children. The difference between me and others is I also want them for other people and their children.
So you want for others what you want for yourself.
Exactly.
Going back to your movie, Killing of Tony Blair, was that about Iraq?
Yes.
Because I haven't watched that film.
It changed my mind. It changed my whole life, you know. Before the Iraq War, I was a Labour Member of Parliament in Glasgow. I would have been there for the rest of my life, and happy to be so. But when Blair took us into that Iraq War, because I knew Iraq very well,
you knew there was no weapons of mass destruction.
I knew it was lying.
And then you took a big stance for Iraq, and the US didn't like you. UK, Tony Blair didn't like you, and they alleged that you lied under oath.
Yeah, I ended up in front of the Senate. It's my greatest day so far. But what could I do? You see, I'm a religious believer. I believe in the Judgment Day. I believe that conscience is my daily communion with God. So if someone asks me to do something that my conscience will not allow me to do, then I'm going to fail the big election on the Judgment Day. I can't do it. Because I knew they were lying about Iraq. I knew it. I was the only British member of Parliament who knew Iraq, who was going there regularly. And I love Iraq, by the way. I dream of it still.
Have you been since?
No, but I still dream of it. And if I hear the word Iraq, I turn around like somebody called my name. It's that central to my being. Because I knew they were lying, I had to oppose them. And because, by the grace of God, I have a good voice, I can find words, I can do things. Like I took a red London bus, paid for by Sheikh Zayed, the late ruler of the UAE. He asked me, what do you want to do? I told him I want to take a red London bus all the way from Big Ben to Baghdad to draw attention to the unjust way in which Iraqis are being starved. He paid it immediately, paid everything. He was a very great and generous man. I took a red London bus from Big Ben to Baghdad. By the time we arrived in Baghdad, 3 million people were out on the streets to greet the red London bus arriving. There's a movie called Big Ben to Baghdad. People should watch it. It's free on YouTube. And I did what I did because I knew the truth. And I cannot allow people to lie. If, la samahallah, you were to start lying now about my friend, or I couldn't allow you to do it. I'd have to intervene.
You've got God's conscience.
Yeah, I've got an acute sense of conscience. I from Irish Catholic stock. They say that we are born with the original sin. They say that we are guilt tripped throughout our lives, and it's partly true. You know, I would feel impossibly guilty if I remained silent about an injustice that I knew to be unjust and taking place in front of me. As Malcolm X, a great hero of mine, said, that if you tremble with indignation about any injustice anywhere, you're a brother of mine, whatever color you are, whatever religion you are. And I tremble with that indignation. I cannot bear to see bullying. I've all my life hated bullies.
I've seen you taking a stand on that point of bullying for Imran Khan in Pakistan. Exactly. He's a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
And now, recently, he's been sentenced to 10 years. I love Imran Khan. He was my role model growing up. I watched his all his cricket. I read his book, All Round View, when he went to Oxford University. I learnt a lot from him. Now, sadly, he's got a 10-year sentence, and that's the oldest trick in the political world. Lock him up before the election so he hasn't got no power. What's your view about that? That's dirty politics.
It's very dirty. And by the way, it's now more than 10 years. It's 10 years on one and 16 on the other. A ban from political life forever. An unpayable fine.
That means he'll die in prison because he's already 17 early.
Exactly so. He's over 70.
Yeah.
And now his good wife is also behind bars.
She's got 14 years.
She's got 14 years. So, as an example of bullying, it's difficult to beat. Imran Khan is the rightful Prime Minister of Pakistan. He was illegally removed in an unconstitutional coup. And not content with that, they've now put him in a prison. But by the grace of God, I know someone who was with him in prison recently, a lawyer. He told me Imran's never been in better shape.
Yeah, he's training every day.
Exercising all day and every day. You see, this is what I mean about boomerangs. It's the law of unintended consequences. They have made Imran Khan even greater than he was, even fitter than he was, even more mentally, physically, spiritually, determined,
stronger,
and they won't be able to keep him in prison. The people will tear down those walls one way or another. They've put him out the game, but his party is still the most popular party in
Yes.
Pakistan by a long way. And you can't erase these facts. It's not like a rubber rubbing out words on a page. These things cannot be erased because they're in people's hearts. You can jail Imran Khan and his good wife, but you cannot jail the people of Pakistan as a whole.
Yeah, the whole nation you can't
The
jail
whole
it.
nation cannot be erased. So,
Do you think who's the power behind it? Would you say the Pakistani constitution or is it external powers? Because a lot of people say it's America behind it.
I believe the coup was organized at the
UN summit.
the instruction of the United States because they knew what was coming next.
Yes.
They knew the kind of things that were going to be happening in the world, and they knew they couldn't rely on Imran Khan to support injustice.
Yeah, because Imran's like you. He's fearless.
I totally feel
Yeah,
it.
you boys have got big...
We fear only God.
yes.
And I know, although he's lying in a jail cell now, I know the kind of thoughts that are in his mind, the kind of determination that's there. And he will prevail. And if not him, his sons.
Do you think he'll go down in history like Nelson Mandela?
For sure. For sure. And I hope that he doesn't spend the 27 years that Nelson Mandela spent. I was very proud to be an underground soldier in apartheid South Africa of the ANC, led by Nelson Mandela. It's one of my proudest achievements that I gave my blood literally on the floor of the Guguletu police station in Cape Town at the hands of an apartheid policeman. I conducted missions underground for the ANC in South Africa, and no one can ever take that away from me. And of course, there's much still to be done in South Africa, but freedom comes. The truth will out. Justice will prevail. It did in South Africa, it will in Palestine, and it will in Pakistan.
I hope so. Now, going back to the UK, I want to ask you a couple of questions about COVID. During COVID, would you say that's a natural disease or man-made?
I suspect it's man-made. Who made it and for what purpose? The jury's still out. I'm one of these that favours the bioweapon theory developed at Fort Kendrick in Texas, introduced into China during the military games. I don't know that, but I suspect it. I cannot imagine what good can come of these biological weapons industries.
So some people made a lot of money from it. A lot of contracts are awarded in the UK by ministers to PPE.
Often to their friends,
Yes. What's your take on that?
Oh, well, I'm waiting for this COVID inquiry to actually inquire. So far, it's been looking for the odd scapegoat, Michelle Mone, the Tory peer who's fled the country and whose husband is now on trial. These are just scapegoats. The big criminals are still at large. We wasted, as a country, not only £43 billion on ineffective COVID measures, but our economy has never recovered from COVID. And the mental health of many of our people, particularly our young people, has not recovered. So this is a scandal of unimaginable scale. And so if we discover corruption, if we discover a deliberate intent to produce a virus that would not be able, at least for a long time, to be combated and that will help to kill millions of people, well, that's off the scale. There's no way of measuring how big a crime that is. I got the vaccinations because my doctor told me to, and I can't lie to you, I haven't suffered any ill effects, and neither did I get COVID. But there's very obvious evidence now that premature death is visiting people in their 20s and their 30s.
Heart disease. A lot
Heart
of people.
disease. That may very well be linked to these
Okay.
vaccines. It's no accident that the big pharma that made the vaccines took very good care to make sure they had indemnity against legal action from people who might turn out to be able to claim they were victims of that pharma.
And the founder didn't take the vaccination himself.
No,
That says something. That says something for itself.
Yeah, I'm amazed to discover all these top politicians that didn't take
Yes.
the vaccine.
So they
I
must have had
was
some inside information.
Well, I wasn't in Parliament at the time, so maybe I just didn't hear the buzz. But I queued up dutifully, like the other citizens, to get the vaccine. And it hadn't done me any harm, but it would appear to have done a lot of people some harm. And that's the danger with rushing into pharmaceutical developments without remotely the time to study the potential harmful effects. The final accounting's not yet done, but there's an argument that says we would have been better not responding in the ways that we did. That the net effect, you take the mental health, economic health, health damage done by the vaccines, and so on. We would have been better not to have done those things. Now, of course, hindsight is 2020, and I accept and appreciate that I'm now speaking from hindsight. But those presumably who were in charge, they had foresight. They knew what the effects would be, and they failed us. The government failed us, the opposition failed us, first with COVID, then with Ukraine, now with Gaza.
Yeah.
You're seeing a pattern here.
So we were getting failed so much, George. So how would you win the trust of the public? So a lot of my friends and family, they don't trust politicians anymore, as you just said.
Yeah.
Gaza, COVID, weapons of mass destruction. How do you win the public's trust again? Because politicians aren't trusted, sadly.
No. Neither journalists.
Yeah, so if you're in power, in power, George, how do you win the public's trust?
Yeah. People will
How do you separate the wood from the trees if you're in power?
People will watch your podcast because they know that you are seeking the truth. They watch my mother of all talk shows in their millions every week. Why? Because they might not agree with me, but they know I'm looking for the truth. And they know that the mainstream media is actually a conspiracy against truth. It is a part of the machinery that hides the truth from people. And the political class, I'm not sure who works for who, by the way. Does the media work for the political class, or does the political class work for the media?
They're in bed together.
What's the role of the permanent state, the deep state, big pharma, military-industrial complex? I'm sounding like Russell Brand here. The truth is, we're led by the worst of us. And that's what we need to change. Because otherwise, it's very dangerous. If people lose faith, if they conclude that voting doesn't change anything, and that the political class are all crooks,
then why vote?
Then why vote?
Yeah.
And why tolerate it? And I don't want that. I hate war. I hate unrest.
So how do you bring the trust back? That's my question, George. I'd love to know, how will you win the trust back of the public? Because at the moment, politicians aren't trusted, sadly.
We need to change the politicians. And I think that's happening. I'm standing here independently. There's independents sprouting up everywhere. And I believe they're going to do very well. People don't like parties. They don't like the party system. They think that Sunak and Starmer are two cheeks of the same arse, and they are. And they don't like what comes out of it. They are looking for an alternative. We had, once upon a time, a political class. A lot of people don't like him. But if not for Mr. Churchill, I'd be speaking to you in German right now. That's a fact. If he had not been there, if he had not stepped forward and said, no surrender, make me the Prime Minister, I'll refuse to surrender, we'd be speaking in German right now. The Hitlerites would still rule the world. You need that moment again. You need people to emerge that the public can get behind for a noble cause. And that noble cause is obvious. It is the restoration of pride in our country. I looked at a video this morning of Britain in the late 1950s, early 1960s. It was a very different Britain to what we have now. But it was a Britain with some hope, with some expectation of progress. A Britain in which parents believed, and that belief was borne out, that their children would have a better life than they did. But that's not the Britain we have now. This is a Britain without hope. This is a Britain that's going to the dogs, that can find money to burn people in wars, but can't find money to keep our old age pensioners warm in the winter time, that can't build houses for people that need them, that can't find meaningful work at decent pay for people that need them, or never mind the people that need them. I'm not asking for charity here. If I look at one aspect that has been occupying me, as I say, I'm a father of 6, so I've done my bit. Our birth rate is collapsing. In a country that says we don't want immigrants. Do the maths. Who's going to pay tax to keep you in your old age if you don't have children and you don't have immigrants? And yet, we have a government that punishes you for having more children. The child benefit stops at 2 kids, and Starmer has agreed to it. Both Labour and Conservatives agreed to a 2-child cap on childbirth. We should be bribing people to have more children. We should say, have 4 children, you'll get double, more than double, the child benefit. Not for their sake, but because we need it. Who's going to wipe your backside in an old person's home when you reach that age, if there's no new people coming through? This is the kind of stupidity that we have. Or, I've got a granny flat on my house for my old mother. God bless her, 89 years old. If I didn't have a granny flat, somebody else would have to keep her at much greater expense. Why not pay me through the tax system to keep my old relatives at home? Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Common sense.
That happens a lot in Asian families.
For sure, they wouldn't dream of sending their old people into a home.
In the Western world, as soon as your parents get older, they put them in care homes.
Shuffle them off.
And another question, George, for you is, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, what do you think of that? Like in the future, people might start paying for property using Bitcoins. Like Elon Musk says you can buy Teslas with Bitcoins. What's your take on the financial sector? Bitcoins, if you become a future, let's say, prime minister, would you allow trading in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'm for sure. Max Kaiser, my very dear friend and former colleague, he's now in El Salvador, where he's turning El Salvador into the Bitcoin cryptocurrency capital of the world. Max gave me some Bitcoin back when it was worth almost nothing.
Have you cashed in?
No. Now that it's
a clever man.
I'm not. I still think it's got a long way to go, and I'll never cash in because I have 6 children to keep and leave behind me. But Max gave me Bitcoin when they were worth virtually nothing. And I believed him because he was an expert. He told me this is the future. And because I never tried to have a dog and bark myself, I listened to experts. Max was the expert on Bitcoin, and he's still an advisor on it to many people in more powerful positions than I. And I believe that, look, fiat currency is finished. We have worthless money. The United States deficit has now reached unimaginable proportions. and is secured only by their dollar hegemony, their hegemony in the SWIFT system and so on, both of which are coming rapidly to an end. Saudi Arabia today joined the BRICS. The Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the new economic power in the world, the BRICS, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Most of the people and most of the money in the world are now in those organizations. The old world is dying, the new world still struggling to be born, but once labor begins, it eventually ends in a birth. And that's the period we're in now. So quantitative easing, which is what we've been doing now for the best part of 20 years, since the crash in 2008, that quantitative easing is unsustainable. Just printing fiat currency is of no use unless you have an economy with fundamentals. Why has the Russian economy thrived in the middle of all these sanctions, whilst we who imposed the sanctions have sunk further and further? Because Russia has real things, has oil and gas,
Natural resources,
raw materials, basic commodities. What do we have? We have a casino economy in the City of London, playing games with derivatives and hedge funds and all the rest of it. That's not a real economy. If I write you a letter and send it to you and I charge you for it, that will be in the GDP, but it's not really work, is it? It's not really wealth, is it? Wealth is real things that people need and people will go on to use. So, yeah, I'm open to any suggestions on cryptocurrency, and I believe they make sense.
Good. I like the way you move with the times.
Yeah.
Because some politicians won't even understand crypto very well the way you do.
No, I not only that, I was the first member of parliament on Twitter, the first.
So you're ahead of the times.
That's why I now have best part of 1 million followers. I'm not just sharp enough to stay ahead of the times. I have children who keep me, my children.
Youngest is 6?
My 3.
3.
And grandchildren. And they and their friends have taught me things that are beyond the ken of most people of my age. And that's why I understand the business of broadcasting and so on. It's been my life now for a long time.
And also, George, what do you think of politicians receiving gifts? Like you got gifts from the leader of Dubai,
Abu
Dhabi, watches for a private time.
It's a very funny
So
thing.
can you tell the story? Because some politicians take gifts from different states but don't disclose it.
Yeah.
Imran Khan's, that's one of his allegations. He got a state gift and sold it. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of politicians receiving gifts?
I'm surprised that you knew that story. It's a great one. Private Eye exposed the fact that the late Sheikh Zayed had given me 7 luxury watches. Every time I met him, he gave me a luxury watch. And I finally had to ask him to stop giving me watches because I have to register them in the parliamentary register of interests. And the press were starting to take an interest. He should have given me a house. Then I could have declared it once, and it could have appreciated. No, of course, when a gift is given to a state, that property belongs to the state. When a gift is given to an individual who has public responsibilities, then they must disclose it. And I believe that Imran Khan did disclose it. I believe he did nothing wrong. But even if he did not properly dispose of a watch, the previous leaders of Pakistan, now prosecuting him, have corruptly looted Pakistan
for billions of
dollars. Billions and billions. I spoke to a football agent last night, no names, no pack drill, told me that his client lost a very lucrative move to a very, very top club in England because he got caught up in a false accusation of betting on himself. which has turned out to be a friend of his on Facebook, who bet $40 that this footballer would get a yellow card in such and such a game. So the charges are dismissed, it's ludicrous, and so on. It's the equivalent.
Yeah,
Imran Khan is that $40 guy.
exactly.
The people who are prosecuting him own half of Mayfair.
If Imran Khan's got 10 years, if you use that as a president, the previous politician should get 1,000 years.
Yeah.
But also, I understand you're on Big Brother. You were on the Big Brother.
I was. Celebrity Big Brother.
I heard you were a pussy on there. Sorry, pussycat. What do you do on Big Brother? What was that about, George?
Well, I was on, not just on Celebrity Big Brother, but on the greatest Celebrity Big Brother. Most people would agree with that.
Was then Boris Johnson's father on there as well?
No, it was long before that. It was 2005.
All right.
The late and great Pete Burns, the rock and roll singer from Port Sunshine, was on it. Dennis Rodman, the legendary basketball player, was on it. Many other entertaining, irritating, semi-lunatic housemates.
How long do you last in there?
I lasted 22 days.
That's brave. Brave.
If you weren't mad when you went in, you were definitely mad when you came out. But most people would agree it was the most entertaining Big Brother ever. One of the ways they drive you mad is depriving you of food. So you get a task. If you don't perform it, if you decline to perform it, or you perform it poorly, then not only do you go hungry, but all your housemates go hungry. There's no dinner that night. So stakes are high, and they've already built you up through sensory deprivation. No radio, no TV, nothing to read. You're in a bubble. And I got the task of pretending to be a cat. I saw myself as a big cat, a lion or a tiger or something, not a pussy. But I had to pretend to be a cat. I had no idea people were watching, that it would be a big thing until I came out, when I discovered it was a very big thing indeed. And my crime really was to have done it too well.
Yeah.
But then I'm like that, you see. If I'm given something to do, I try to do it very well. If I'd just gone through the motions of being a cat, you wouldn't be asking me about it now. But I put my heart and soul into it, probably unwisely. But you know what Big Brother did for me? It meant that an entire generation of people knew me that didn't know any other politicians. Yeah. And I don't think I did badly in it at all. I used the money that I got paid for it to employ people in my constituency in the East End of London. And heaven knows the constituency needed that. I wouldn't do it again, but I'm not sorry that I did it.
Good. Good to share.
I've been offered, by the way,
to do another Big Brother.
I was offered £250,000 to do the final Big Brother, and I was offered more than that to do the I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here in the jungle. But I wouldn't do any of these things again. But I'm not sorry that I did it.
Good. It's all an experience, isn't it? So, George, that brings me to an end. I know you're very busy. You've got to go and win over Rochdale. I wish you good luck in your campaign, and I hope you become a member of Parliament in Rochdale and bring change. Sure. Also, I understand you haven't eaten because you're doing intermittent fasting. But I must thank you for your time today. You're very busy, and you took time out of your busy schedule. And I wish you all the best in your political journey. Thank you for your time. Bricks to Riches is now bringing this podcast to a close. Thank you.